The best introduction to any story I have ever seen. From everything I've consumed, anime, manga, light novels, the whole space, 4 episodes of a 1995 mecha anime sits at the very top. Neon Genesis Evangelion. I just finished the series, and before I say anything else about it, I wanted to give those first 4 episodes their flowers, because what they do is something I don't think gets talked about with nearly as much seriousness as they deserve. And once I explain it to you, I think it changes how you watch the show entirely. Now, before we go any further, this is obviously my take. I haven't consumed every story ever created, no one has. So when I say the best introduction I've ever seen, that is exactly what I mean. Everything I've personally seen. I've seen quite a bit for what it's worth, but the caveat is there and it will stay there. Alright, what do I actually mean when I say the best introduction in storytelling? Because if I just mean really good opening episodes, that's not a useful bar at all. Lots of shows have good opening episodes, and that's not remotely what I'm here to argue. Think about how most stories open. They spend their first few episodes telling you what they're about, the premise, the world, the rules of that world, who the characters are, and roughly what they want from life. That's how storytelling conventionally works, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with it. You need to know where you are before you can care about what happens there. Most great shows do this and do it really well. NGE does something completely different though. Those first 4 episodes don't spend much time at all establishing the plot at the surface level. What they establish instead is a human architecture within the plot, the psychological and emotional DNA of the people you're about to spend 26 episodes with, before the show ever explains a single concrete thing to you. And it does this so well that by the time episode 4 ends, you already understand Shinji Ikari on a deeper level than you understand protagonists of shows you've spent 50 episodes with. That is what I mean. And if you've never really thought about why that hits the way it does, that's what this video is for. One of the things I love most about great storytelling, and if you've been on this channel for any amount of time, you already know this, is emotional depth. The ability to make you genuinely feel something for fictional people is one of the most valuable things any story can do. But emotional depth and psychological depth are 2 different things. And understanding the difference between them is actually the whole key to why NGE's opening works the way it does. So stay with me here. Emotional depth puts you in the vicinity of a character's feelings. You watch them go through something hard, you sympathize and you feel for them. That's real and it's powerful, and most good stories manage it to some degree. Psychological depth does something beyond that. It puts you inside a character's head. It gives you access to the actual machinery of who they are, why they do, what they're afraid of, and the things they want that they can't say. And when a story gives you that access early, the kind of attachment it creates is fundamentally different from anything emotional depth alone can produce. When you understand someone from the inside, when you have the full picture of their internal workings, it allows you not just to feel for them, but understand them as well. And understanding is so much stickier than feeling, because feeling can be disrupted by behavior. The moment a character does something frustrating, something you don't like, something you disagree with, something that makes you go, why would you do that? The feeling cracks, but the understanding doesn't, because you already know why. This is why it's possible to both be frustrated by a character's actions and still understand why they did it. In my notes on the series, I literally questioned whether Shinji running away in episode 4 was pathetic, or whether I was just failing to grasp the weight of what he was actually carrying within that moment. That friction was real, but it didn't break anything, because by that point the show had already given me the inside of his head, and I wasn't attached to his behavior but rather the reason behind it. That's a connection that survives frustration in a way that conventional character building struggles to. Most stories build attachment through time. You spend episodes with someone, grow fond of them, and then start caring as a kind of accumulated habit. NGE skips that entire process. It gives you psychological access within the first episode, and the attachment that creates will normally take 20 episodes to develop, except here it happens in 4. It's a special thing not a lot of stories can do. Most don't even attempt to. But once you understand it, the speed at which you fall for this character stops being a surprise and starts making complete sense. Now, I've told you what NGE does and why it works and the way it does, but how it actually delivers all of this is where it gets genuinely impressive. And I think it's a part of this claim you need to actually see to believe. NGE doesn't hand you this psychological access through exposition. It doesn't stop to explain who Shinji is, nor does it have a character sit you down and walk you through his trauma and his fears and the reasons behind the things he does. The delivery method for all this is visual storytelling, and it is the best I've ever seen it executed. I want to say that carefully because it's a big claim. I thought I had seen the ceiling of visual storytelling with the Monogatari series. Shaft's whole approach is maximalist and surrealist and extremely deliberate. They use imagery and framing and color to convey character psychology in ways that are genuinely extraordinary. And then NGE came along. I actually wrote in my notes that I thought I had seen it all with the Monogatari series, and then this came along and proved me wrong. What NGE does is quieter and in some ways more devastating. The shots in those first 4 episodes communicate more than the dialogue ever does. The pacing of the cuts, the way certain moments are held in silence just a bit longer than comfortable, and the eye contact between the characters that carries the whole conversation without a single word being said. All of it is doing work that you absorb without consciously knowing you're absorbing. You can understand everything happening emotionally and psychologically in those 4 episodes without hearing a single line of dialogue, if you're paying attention, that is. That's a rare level of craft, and I mean really, really rare. The moment that crystallized this for me personally was the train station scene in episode 4. That long pause between Shinji and Misato went on for God knows how long without a single word being spoken. The silence carried and communicated everything that needed to be said. I referenced Makoto Shinkai in my notes at that point, because Shinkai is one of the absolute best in the medium at using silent spaces. The garden of words, 5 centimeters per second, voices of a distant star. And I said and still say, NGA did it even better. That pause at the train station told me more about their emotional and psychological states than any monologue possibly could have, and they did it by asking nothing of me except to look. And then there's the Hedgehog's dilemma. Episodes 3 and 4. The concept that becomes, in a lot of ways, the conceptual spine of the whole series. The idea that closeness causes pain, that the very instinct protecting you from hurt is the same instinct keeping you from real connection. Now, the show does directly address this and names it, but here's the thing. It had already been showing you this in Shinji's behavior before that ever happened. All the things you observed from him, hesitations, flinches, every moment of him absorbing something enormous and going quiet rather than responding. That was the Hedgehog's dilemma already in motion. By the time the concept gets named, it doesn't explain him to you but just confirms what you already felt. The visual storytelling got there first. By episode 4, you have the full psychological portrait of this kid. A 14-year-old who has learned across his whole life that closeness is dangerous, that he's not worth much, that the safest thing he can do is make himself small. And you have all that because the show showed you frame by frame until it was impossible to look away. That is why those 4 episodes are what they are. I want to bring Chihayafuru in here because I think it's the most useful comparison I have for sharpening what makes NGE exceptional. And I also want to give it what it deserves because what Chihayafuru does in its opening is remarkable on its own terms. In its first 5 or so episodes, Chihayafuru gives you everything. You get the backstory of the main trio as kids. You see the roots of that passion for character. Yeah, I had to look that up. And you get 3 completely distinct relationships to that passion. 3 different ways of experiencing the same game, each one with its own emotional spine. You get the world, the mechanics, the dynamics between all 3 of them, and a different perspective on what it even means to play at that level. And then it connects all of that directly and logically into who these people are in high school, the present day. The history is built. You can see immediately in who they've become. It's seamless and it's earned, and it doesn't waste a single episode doing it. That is genuinely extraordinary. Chihayafuru's opening does more things simultaneously than almost anything else I've seen, and does all of them exceptionally well. That's why it sits second on this list and I'm not here to dismiss it. But NG does something narrower and deeper. It doesn't give you the world or the mechanics or a complete backstory in any real form. What it does is trade all of that for one thing: psychological depth. And it executes that one thing at a level nothing else I've seen has matched for an introduction. Chihayafuru makes you understand his characters through what they've been through. NGE, on the other hand, makes you understand Shinji through what he is right now in this moment before you even know his history. And that creates a completely different kind of attachment. Both approaches are valid. Both produce something real, but the depth of access those 4 episodes create, the feeling that you already know this kid, that you're already invested before you have any real reason to be, that you're already rooting for something or someone that hasn't even been named yet, that's why it's first. And if you've made it this far, you obviously enjoyed this, so subscribe. You're most likely the kind of person this channel is made for, and I would genuinely love to see you for what's coming next in this series. 4 episodes, that's all it took. And what's interesting is that most people watching NGE for the first time don't fully clock what happened to them until they're already 6, 7, 8 episodes in, realizing they care about these people more than they expected to, more than they can account for through any conventional means, more than they can explain to someone who hasn't seen it yet. That's what psychological access done right actually does. It opens a door into someone's interior world and waits for you to walk through it. And by the time you notice you've been inside Shinji Ikari's head for 4 episodes, you already know him, not the facts about him. Him. If you haven't watched those first 4 episodes with that in mind, go back. Pay attention to what the visuals are doing before anyone says a word. You might be surprised by how much you already understood. This has been Tambe Bryan. Thank you for watching.